Hey everyone, in today's video we're going to have a look at the evaluation, which is the final part of your A-level product design coursework. So this is out of 20 marks. So this includes, the evaluation is like the bit at the very end, but it also does include any evaluation you did throughout the whole folder. So things like when you were evaluating your research and when you did your design development and you evaluate some of your designs, that all counts towards it as well. Okay, so the main final evaluation at the end is broken down into a couple of different bits. Okay, so the first part, which is probably going to go 2 pages, maybe 3, depending on how much you write to it. So you want to start with the design brief that you followed, and then go. So the design brief I followed was, and then you can just copy and paste the design brief that you did. Okay, because that's what you set out to do. The whole point of the design brief was you did all your research, and this is like the mission statement of, look, this is what I set out to do, and now's the time to reflect back and go, okay, you said you wanted to do this. Did you manage to do it? Okay, so that's where we start breaking it down a bit. So basically, I've got 6 different bullet points that I'm going to go through, where I want you to sort of like write a couple of paragraphs for each one. So with the design brief, it's looking back on it and say, okay, after I did everything, after I did all my research, I did my design criteria specification, which is the next one. I said I wanted to design and do this for my clients. Okay, so now you have to go back and say, look, here is my final product, my final prototype, my final model that I produced. Have I met that or not? And it can't be I have met it or I haven't met it. You need to be delving into it, because it's not always black and white. You could say, well, maybe I've met it like 80% of the way. Maybe I met it, but then I tweaked it along the way because I decided something looked better, or maybe I realised that wasn't possible, or maybe I've met it and I think I've met it even more than I said that I was going to meet it. So it's really important you've got that open dialogue of like analysing, being very reflective of, look, here's the final thing, here's what I said I was going to do. Does it meet up perfectly? Because a lot of the time it doesn't meet up exactly the same. Stuff changes as you're going through, but that's fine as long as you are justifying what changes happened. The next bit is probably the longest bit of writing for this part, is your design specification, your design criteria. So those are your targets that you set yourself. So the brief was like the mission statement, and the design spec, design criteria, was broken down into those individual targets, like your target market, your aesthetics, your function, your materials, your construction methods, all of those. So you have to go through, and for each target, have a paragraph for each one, okay? And saying, did you meet this point or not? And if you did, great, how? And if you didn't, why not? What changed? Okay? Next part is, have you then met your client's opinions? Remember, the whole point is you're doing this for your client. So your client said they had the needs X, Y, and Z. They needed this, it needed to be this size, it needed to be able to make this thing easier, or whatever it was. Okay, so you need to then have a think back and go, okay, they said they needed this, and my product fits that perfectly, or maybe it doesn't quite. I kind of got carried away a little bit. Ideally, what you want to have as well is photos of your client interacting with the model that you've got. So if it's like I know a product is quite easy, you can get them to use it, but obviously if it's a scaled down model like architecture, like furniture, don't actually get them to sit on your chair or you'll break it. But you can actually get them to give their honest feedback on it. So having that photograph, if they don't want their faces, you can always blur them out, that doesn't matter. But it's good to show you've gone back to that client again. What they don't want to see, as we said in previous guides, is they don't want to see research that's never ever talked about again. So if your client came up with all these things and then you go and produce something completely different and you've never talked about your client's needs again, they'll be like, well, what's the point? And they'll just start taking marks away because, well, that was not relevant in any way, was it? Okay, so this should take up 1 slide, 1.5 slides, maybe. The biggest part for this particular part is going to be the design criteria, the design specification. Okay, that's the one that's going to be the biggest bit of writing for it. So the next ones, so quality checks. Now, we started to do this with your manufacture plan. So when you did your final design, you did your manufacture plan, step-by-step guide of what you were going to do. And then what you should have done is down the right-hand side of it, right-hand side of it, there's the last 3 columns, taking pictures of everything you did, and then any quality control checks you did to make sure things were done correctly, any changes you had to do, any like developments because things didn't go quite right or anything like that. Okay, you will find you might repeat yourself a bit from your manufacture plan. That's fine, because now's the time to take those and sort of put it all into one big sort of chunk of writing of, look, these are the changes I made. And this is why, because these are the issues I had, and so there can be some issues, some tasks, go perfectly. No issues to go. I did it perfectly. I marked it all out, cut it all, fit perfectly first time. Boom, and I'm amazing, and that's perfect. But a lot of the time there'll be some little jobs that just quite niggle, didn't quite work a little bit, or kind of like mismeasured a little bit, or that didn't quite move as smoothly as I thought it would do, anything like that. That's fine, and this is the time to sort of reflect back on it, okay, and say, look, this was the issue I had, but what they want to see is, here's how I solved it. Sometimes, I know you should never do this on purpose, if you have something that goes wrong, it's good because it gives you a chance to talk about how you solved the problem, okay? What they don't want to see is you had a problem and you went, and just chucked it in the bin because it was rubbish, okay? They want to say, okay, great, you had this issue, this material wasn't quite suitable, or it wasn't quite working how you wanted to do, but then you had to change it, you changed the design slightly, you changed the material, you changed whatever it was, and now it works perfectly. Okay, they want to see you've done that problem solving sort of thing. The next one is your environmental issues. So this is then talking about, now we did do environmental research or materials research in your research in the research section. So in terms of the environmental issues relating to the materials that you've used, okay. So with those particular ones you've got, what are the environmental issues to be considered with that? Like the manufacturing side of it, the disposal of it. Have you covered it in stuff that means it can't be recycled? What are the issues around it? Next, we're going to look at your product comparison. So what you need to do is take your final photograph of your model and take a screenshot or a photograph of your final like fusion render. Put them next to each other, spot the difference, compare. Okay, so you can literally just have like one whole slide and just have your final really nice photograph of your finished product, final really nice render done on Fusion next to each other, and you just circle arrows and sort of pointing out the differences and similarities. Next, we now have further modifications. So if you were going to improve it, what would you do differently? Okay, so be honest. Okay, please don't be really arrogant. Oh, nothing, I nailed it, I'm perfect, aren't I good? Okay, and at the same time, please don't be really, really pessimistic. Oh, it's all rubbish, I'll just start again. Okay, what realistically do you think could be done differently? There's certain parts that need to be reinforced. There's some parts that weren't quite how you pitched it in your head, because we all do that. You picture things in your head, you sketch it all out, you CAD it all up, and you think, oh yeah, it's going to work. And then for whatever reason, just in practice, it's not quite working how you envisioned it. Okay, and that's fine. Okay, but what would you do differently? Okay, what you also need to start thinking about, okay, is how would you change it to be produced for the market properly, like obviously if it's a building, architecture's not going to be mass produced, but it's going to be produced in a more technical way. But if it's like a product like furniture or handheld product, that sort of thing, how would you mass produce it, or would it be done in like general production if it's like an architecture thing? Okay, what you can't do is just say like, oh, a machine will just do it for you. Okay, because that's like the biggest cop out ever, and that'll get you 0 marks. Okay, what industrial practices would be used to do that for real life? Okay, obviously things like if it's going to be like a plastic product that's going to be mass produced, like injection molding, like those sorts of things. Obviously we don't have the kind of things in college. We've got 3D printers, we've got laser cutters, we've got all sorts of stuff. But there's things that are produced mass production in industry, or just one-off productions in industry, where they have much more technical, more expensive machinery that we don't have access to. So what would those be used, and what would be more appropriate for? And then we're going to have your final statement. Okay, so overall, how did you find the whole process? Okay, what did you enjoy the most? Now this is you being like honest reflection of what you've done over the last 2 years. Okay, what did you do that you think went really, really well? What went really successful? What new skills did you learn as you were doing it? Again, if you could start from scratch, is there anything you'd like to try and relearn or get better at that you kind of felt like you kind of glossed over or you shied away from a little bit? A survey. So ideally, you need to completing a survey or questionnaires or something of about 10 different people. There can be people, your client has to be included in this. Ideally 10 people from your target market. What's really helpful is if you can go online and you've got like forums to do with your sort of area of design, put things on there. Now obviously if you put things on Reddit, you suddenly get a million trolls calling you all sorts of horrible names because the internet's full of not very nice people. But if you've got some nice supportive people online that you can talk to, or like people in person, it's really helpful to have people involved in that industry to give you some feedback. Okay, you need something like 6 to 8 questions. Ideally, what you then need to do is convert it to charts and graphs, like bar charts and all the other sort of things. You can do in Excel that sort of just demonstrate and show all the statistics and that type of thing. Okay, so testing, we talked about that before on one of the earlier slides. So you should already have client photos of them using your product. Okay, that's the best way of testing, is just get them to take photos of them interacting with the thing and sort of giving their feedback from it. The Gantt chart, the bit that everyone loved in the research section. Where's my mouse gone? There it is. So the Gantt chart. So the whole point of the Gantt chart was, you said, look, here's all the tasks I've got to do. Here's how long I reckon it's going to take. Now's the time when we use the Gantt chart, because we reflected back and say, okay, I thought it was going to take me 12 weeks to make my final product. In reality, it took me 15 because no one listened to Simon when they should have done. Or I ordered my materials from China, not realising it would take me 40 years to arrive. Or I thought this process would be a lot easier and it was a lot harder. Or I thought this process would take a lot longer and it was actually really, really easy. Okay, so that's the point of having the Gantt chart in the first place, is you think how long it should take you, and then you sort of reflect back later and go, actually, I overestimated or underestimated how long it would take me. Then, the final page of your research, except for your Gantt chart, should just be photos of every angle of your product. Basically any part of your work that you want marks for, you need to have photographs as much as possible from. Okay, please make sure they are good quality photographs. Avoid anyone in the background. Avoid there being bits in the middle of it, like your keys or anything around it like that. Ideally a white background. If you're good at Photoshop, you can find Photoshop it into places. That'd be very good. But if you're not good at Photoshop, don't do a poor job at it, because it looks terrible when you're not good at Photoshop. But just basically any bit of practical skill that you've demonstrated that you would like to get credit for, which essentially should be everything, is loads of photographs. Obviously you want photographs of the whole thing, from different angles, but then zoomed in on certain different parts as well. And then making sure, if you can, have it working. So if it's a light or anything like that, making sure you've got it physically working as well. So just to show you a couple of examples. So we've seen this folder in all the other guides I've shown you as well. So the chair. So this is his final render. This is what I look at. This is the product, his actual model, and this is Photoshop. Now the Photoshop's okay, but I mean, if you're looking at perspective wise, the angle is off slightly. That's what I'm making sure your Photoshop is decent. But just comparing the two basically, because actually you can see got pretty close to what he said he was going to set out to do. So talked about the differences and similarities. Testing, so talking about the fact that he actually had a mechanism for how his chair would raise and lower, and the base would move and that type of thing. Feedback. So he actually went online, managed to get some feedback, and then also some people within his target market from the workplace that he went into. Passed specification, goes over a couple of slides, and then sort of photographs. Every single part you want to have credit tip for. Excuse me. The best way to get decent photographs, just put loads of white paper down and try and make a little photo booth style thing. We'll see if we can rig one up in the workshop. Basically just trying to show all the good parts and trying to show nice quality photographs. Sorry, clicking is my wrist. I don't know why it suddenly decided to start clicking. Feature changes, so what would you do to improve it and why? Gantt chart, reflecting back over everything you've done and how accurate were you, and hindsight. Okay, and that is your evaluation. So I know it's been a long old journey. It's been almost 2 years. But last little bit, I say little, it's 20 marks, so it's a good chunk. It's only 5 marks less than your practical and your designing marks. So it's a good old chunk of marks. Okay, so remember, it does include, the evaluating you do in your research and your designing, but the final written evaluation at the end is such a big chunk. It can take you about a week to write. Okay, don't be surprised if it goes over 3-4 slides at the end. Okay. Hopefully that made sense. If you've got any questions, please let me know.